I had a rough upbringing. I was a street kid for a really long time, and homeless people are
Mm,
very dynamic. And the fact that those people are able to survive in conditions that me and you can't fathom. So I followed homeless people all around New York and took pictures of them, and pictures that didn't show them in a, I didn't want to show them looking bad. I
yeah.
just showed them surviving. So for these young ladies, they were young, pretty young ladies. I was like, well, if I could show them how they really look,
Yeah.
that could help catapult them into something else.
What's up, you guys? It's your girl Bianca B, and welcome to the Bianca B Show, where we talk about business, finances, and friendships. So I'm super excited to speak with Max Luger today. I'm so excited because his work is just incredible, and what he's doing for the homeless, what he has just contribute to the world is really, really dope. And I thought this opportunity would be cool to have him on. He's an entrepreneur, and I'm excited to talk to him about homeless, not hopeless. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful, and I appreciate you having me on the show and allowing me to speak about what I do on your platform.
Yeah, so let's get a little backstory. You are a photographer. I mean, not just any photographer. You've worked with Vogue, Taylor Swift, Target, Essence. You've been around. So kind of explain how your photography started and how your journey started.
Well, photography for me started as a point of dissatisfaction with how my life was at the time.
Mhm.
So, quick little backstory: I had a rough upbringing. I was a street kid for a really long time, and through the consequence of being a street kid, you go to jail. That's part of the natural process of it. And upon exiting jail, I knew I didn't want to go back to the life that I was living, but I didn't know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
I cut hair for years, so I'm a barber by trade, and I didn't want to keep doing that. So I was left in a purgatory state until now. I'll just keep it real with you. Until one day, I was on my way to go sell some weed to this little homeboy of mine. Well, a kid that my homeboy told me about when I was living in Brooklyn. And he was like, yo, this dude is from Nashville. He don't know nobody and he wants some weed. Da, 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 da. I was like, all right, say less. So I went over, and this kid had his photo studio and a music studio, and it was all just a creative world. And I was like, hey man, what do you do? He was like, I do photography, I do music and all of that stuff. And I was like, damn. But the idea of doing photography was daunting because it seemed like such a study based process. Like I would have to learn a lot. I was nervous, like, damn, can I pick up the skill set? And then if I pick it up, am I going to actually be good?
Right.
So you can learn the technical world of photography, which is okay, the operation and all of that stuff. But now, does my viewpoint translate from
Right.
a commercial standpoint, right? So that was daunting. But my first big break came when I rented a studio in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and I was committed. I'm like, you know what? Anything that I think that I'm gonna do that's worthy, if you dedicate your money to it, you have no choice because you already spent the bread.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the
So
gear
instead,
is not cheap.
I'm trying to tell you,
Yeah.
at first I was gonna get a little Rebel, a Canon Rebel, good camera,
Yeah.
but my hands are kind of big and the camera looked kind of small. And I was like, I was like, this is a toy. And I was like, I'm not gonna be respected with this. And so I went and I bought a Canon Mark One, which
Mhm.
was 5D. A
Right.
5D Mark One was when Canon first introduced that DSLR with video capabilities.
Mhm.
So it was like $3,500
Yeah.
for just the camera body. Then the lenses were like 1,200, 1,500 per lens. Oh my God. Once I did that, I knew I had to learn it,
Mhm.
and then once that happened, I went and got a studio so I could take it serious instead of shooting in my basement. And I became friends with guys in the studio area. And lo and behold, one day, those guys were well ahead of me in their world. It's this company called Fat King Films. They
Uh-huh.
do a lot of stuff for Sony. They're the ones who brought me into the Taylor Swift job because the photographer that was supposed to be working for them got sick, could not make it, and they needed a still photographer. So they asked me, they knocked on my door, and they was like, Max, you doing anything? I was like, why? What's up? Hey, they gave me the scenario. I acted cool. I mean, if you want me to come do it, sure. They were
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, if you could come, 2:30. It was like 12:30. I closed the door, started doing the Tiger Woods pump, the little kick. I was like, yes. And then it really kind of jettisoned from there because I did a good job with them.
Mhm.
They hired me again to shoot Bridget Mendler, their collaboration with that young Disney girl, Bridget Mendler. So
Mhm.
I did that. And then I did also Target's grocery activation. Because at one point, Target didn't have groceries.
Right, they didn't.
They didn't. So I shot their whole grocery activation.
Wow.
So after that, it was like, okay, then I did a job with Amex, did another Amex job. And it kind of kept going from there, right? It just kept going. And it was amazing because my background and where I'm from doesn't lend to make that type of switch,
Exactly.
So that is basically my world into photography. And then from there it went from shooting Kevin Costner with Toyota, shooting, man, a lot of people. It just kept going.
And what I love that you mentioned was, when you got the opportunity, it was really based off not just luck, but relationships. And I really
Yes.
advocate for that because you just never know when you're going to get that moment and that big opportunity. And it's just literally a ripple effect. And so I know you said you met the person in in New York, the guy from Nashville, and how you got started. How old were you during that time?
I was early 30s. I was like 32.
Oh, wow. So you started a little bit later on in life and look at you progressing. And I love,
Way later.
and so, relationships, I want to kind of dive into that since we're on that subject. What have you learned and what advice would you give to, those young people out there, how important relationships are?
Well, relationships are huge, but being able to show up and accomplish what you said you're going to do is even stronger, right? The relationship is not a problem. It's necessary in the art world to have relationships. And for me, I'm a people person, so I like people. So I
Yeah.
have no problem engaging and talking to people and doing things of that nature. And it allowed me to move a little faster because a lot of the jobs that I got weren't jobs you could find online,
Right.
weren't jobs that were being advertised anywhere. They were word of mouth jobs
Mhm.
that only worked within a network of word of mouth.
Right.
So those relationships are very important.
Mhm. And as a photographer, what have you found has been the most challenging type of art pieces to, um, create? Because I know you said you did, Taylor Swift, all these different people, but, to Target and food, I know as a film person, food photography is challenging for me. So what's the biggest challenge for you as a photographer?
Well, I do primarily portrait work,
Mhm.
and I went ahead and I've experimented though with multiple areas because in the beginning I wasn't sure what discipline was going to work for me.
Right.
So I remember I bought a $1,800 tilt shift lens
Mhm.
because I thought that I was going to get into architectural photography because I liked architecture. I love architecture. So I was like, man, how do they get that perspective? And it was like, oh, they use a tilt shift lens. So I went and bought a tilt shift lens, only used it like 4 times and ended up selling it because that wasn't my discipline. It
Mhm.
didn't lock in the way I thought it would.
Right.
I tried still life photography, which is very like scientific.
Yeah.
It's very scientific. It's very you alone with your equipment, and there's not really a lot of people involved in that.
Yeah.
So I didn't really enjoy that because it became a little too much solitude. It was kind of weird. But in terms of difficulty, I would think event photography is difficult, but I love it because you have to capture moments that are interesting and isolate those interesting moments that are ever changing.
Yeah.
So event photography, because it's so quick,
Yeah.
is probably the more challenging of the disciplines for me.
So, homeless, not hopeless. These images are like amazing. Like
Thank you.
when your PR team sent it to me, I was like, wow, these are stunning. How did you get into that concept? What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, when on the early part of my career as a photographer, I started to get into document journalistic style photography. And homeless people are
Mm,
very dynamic. And the fact that those people are able to survive in conditions that me and you can't fathom
mm,
is very interesting to me. That's an interesting
yeah.
human condition. So I followed homeless people all around New York and took pictures of them, and pictures that didn't show them in a, I didn't want to show them looking bad. I
Yeah.
just showed them surviving, right?
Mhm.
So that was a big thing for me. Then when I went to Germany and Amsterdam and London, there's homeless people all over there.
Wow.
And they're all in London, the homeless people are Irish,
Mhm.
predominantly Irish, right? Irish immigrants that come over there for a better life because Ireland has a super high unemployment rate.
Wow,
So
didn't know
they, yeah, so their unemployment rate is huge. So they go to London for a better life. And of course, there's tons of them. So they can't really, just become immigrants on the street. Then I went to Amsterdam and they don't really have a strong homeless thing, but you just have people with mental problems
yeah.
who decide to live. So there's a few different constructs when it comes to homeless people I've come to understand. There are some people who fully rebel against the system in a very cognizant way.
Mhm.
They don't, they're not homeless based on any particular circumstance. They're homeless because they no longer have faith in the system. So you
Got
have those people. Then you have the people who have mental abnormalities. Then you have people who are homeless based on a circumstance, lost a job, got sick, blase, blase, blase. And
it.
those things led to their current condition. So for homeless, not hopeless, I had a friend of mine who was a counselor in a homeless shelter for women. And when I found you, she told me it's a new job she had. And she was like, these are all young girls who went through all these different things. For me, I know that I don't have the resources to independently change anyone's life from that financial standpoint, but I am an artist, so I can use what I do as an artist to potentially catapult you from a visual standpoint, since that's what we're living in, social media, visuals. One image could send a person off to the races.
Yeah.
So that's how I create value in what I do for people that are in that condition. Because the one thing you wake up in the morning and you see once you look in the mirror is yourself. And depending on that image that you see is going to dictate how you feel about moving in the future.
Mhm.
So for these young ladies, they were young, pretty young ladies. I was like, well, if I could show them how they really look,
Yeah.
that could help catapult them into something else.
Mm. And when did you start this project?
2000, it was right before the pandemic. It
Mhm.
was literally maybe 3 months before the pandemic really kicked into gear.
Wow. And
So
how often do you shoot homeless people?
a lot. Like I live in LA, so I got a whole catalog of homeless people from Skid Row. And
Mhm.
then I used to cut hair on Skid Row with
Mhm.
this organization. So I was out there and we're just cutting these people's hair, trying to make them look and feel better so they could attempt to try to get back into society. So it's something dear to me because I do believe that those of us who have been blessed, like, what's the difference between us and a homeless person is circumstance in a
Yeah.
lot of situations, right? The circumstance of your parents, maybe if you didn't have good, strong parents and they themselves were in a compromised position, they had nothing to give you. So when you're on Skid Row, you see these people with families. Like I was cutting little kids' hair, little kids. with their families. And you're thinking, well, what's the trajectory of this child?
Right.
What's his trajectory? Even with the girls, more importantly, the reason why I thought the girls were more important, because girls are the they create the next generation.
Yeah.
The next generation is coming through all of these women. So if you don't try to do something to help those girls' mental state in some sort of way, what kind of mothers are they going to end up being? Because there's a high probability that they will be mothers at one day.
Had you met someone after shooting them? Had you met someone where their life just felt completely different because they felt not finally, but felt beautiful? Because when you captured those photos, I was like, oh my God, these girls are just beautiful. Did anybody have an impactful story after shooting with them?
All of those girls,
Mhm.
like literally all of those girls got back with their family.
Mm.
The young girl towards the end with the black hair and the black outfit, she wrote a poem talking about the abuse and the things that she went through. And a family took her in, like
Wow.
part of her extended family took her in. The Indian looking girl, she got into nursing school like she was trying to get into.
Wow.
And the other girl got back with her father. Her father took her back. She lives in New Jersey right now with her dad.
Yeah, that's make me emo. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So what is the ultimate goal of Homeless, Not Hopeless?
I think creating a platform that allows people to be independent and functional.
Mhm.
I believe a lot of nonprofits have good intentions, but you are maintaining codependency. You
Mhm.
keep just giving a person something doesn't help them sustain themselves. You just gave them something that once it's gone, you got to give it to them again.
Wow. I love that. I mean, I never thought about that from that perspective. That's
Yeah,
that's incredible.
the nonprofit I was working for, they were doing great things, but the problem was I kept seeing the same people for months on end. So
Mhm.
what's changing?
Got it. This is incredible. I mean, this is incredible. I'm very inspired by the work that you're doing. And so, what advice would you give to young photographers out there who like move to LA and move to New York and trying to get their foot in the door? What is the first step of entrepreneurship in photography?
I think the climate has changed a lot from when I started, and I started late, and it was already changing at that point. I remember when Instagram first started, and I remember photographers saying, "Nah, that ain't gonna go nowhere. Nobody's gonna invest in that," and blah 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 blah. So we were purists in our thinking, like, "Oh no, the art is gonna be the main thing." Right now, that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's really gonna be your connections, one, and your ability to create projects that are stimulating.
Mm.
Even your own independent projects should be stimulating. From a commercial standpoint, it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of networking and being able to have a personality. Because right now we're in the personality. It's not about how good you are. It's not
Yeah.
even about how good you are anymore. It's about how many people like you.
Yeah, no, if you're likable, that's a fact. Because anybody can pick up a camera. I've seen it, camera, their phone, and not be the best, but people like them. So that's
So they get hired, right? Even if they're not that good, they
mhm,
still get hired.
yeah,
So I do think having a strong, personable personality is significant. And I do think having other revenue streams is also very significant, especially in today's era, right?
yeah.
Like one horse pony is gonna have a difficult time in today's circus. It's gonna be
Mhm.
hard. So this is why I'm involved in real estate. I manage my family's real estate company as well, because I know that diversifying my skill set is how I'm going to be able to sustain, especially in today's era.
Yeah, especially in the film and video world. Trust me, I know. Trust me, I know. So, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me. How can people follow your work? And kind of if there's makeup artists, if there's other photographers who want to shadow you, how can they be involved in your projects?
The Content Campus, that's the company. That's the social media, thecontentcampus.com. You could go there. And I do think that studying what made photography great is also very important. To study what you see today, you're not studying the origin, you're only studying the after. You got to study the before so you understand the true craft of photography, and to be an artist, not so much a photographer, but an artist.
Yeah.
Because in, quick thing, photography in the beginning was a utility based occupation. The photographer took pictures of the artist's artwork, or they took pictures of the court proceedings or the guy being arrested. They were solely a utility based career. Later on, photography, because artists looked at photography as like you're using a tool to create your outcome versus me as an artist painting my thing or a sculpture. So right now with technology, there's so much imagery technology with AI and everything else. Unless you are making a unique statement within your work, and if you're following the hottest trend, there's no reason for anyone to invest in you because you are a lower version of what's already been established.
Right.
So it's better for you to study the classics and then reinvent that in your work in order to make a unique statement.
Love that. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me. It's your girl Bianca.
You.
Make sure you follow me on Instagram at It's Bianca B and at Bianca B Show. Thank you so much.